Hi, everyone, and welcome to the last session of the day for Disrupt 2020. And this is using iNaturalist in education. And I'd like to introduce Tony from iNaturalist, who's going to share some of the resources from the platform.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. So I'm Tony. I'm iNaturalist Outreach and Community Coordinator. That means I do our social media. I answer our technical support emails, and I also help manage disputes and other issues with the community of iNaturalist. And I've been using it for about 12 years since its inception. And I also have about 8 years of environmental education experience. So not really in a classroom, but after school, outdoor education, and interpretive. And I was an interpretive naturalist in Hayward for a few years as well. So I do have a bit of a background working with kids and teaching about the outdoors. So I don't want to get too off track here, and I'll get into it in just a second. If you want to write down in the chat if you've ever used iNaturalist, if you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great. But I'm gonna start sharing my slides and go through my talk, which should take maybe 30 to 40 minutes, and then I'd be happy to answer questions and demonstrate anything if need be. And yeah, that's about it. Let me just share my slides and we'll get started. All right. Can you see my slide? All right, cool. Awesome. So iNaturalist is a platform and a community. It is a joint initiative of the California Academy of Sciences and the National Geographic Society. And this is just a picture down in Joshua Tree of one of my favorite lizards, a chuckwalla, that my wife's taking a photo of. Now, iNaturalist, to be honest, was not actually designed to be used like specifically for classrooms, but a lot of people do use it in schools, and especially with remote learning, distance learning being a bigger thing now. We definitely saw an uptick at the end of the spring semester, and we expect to have more educators trying to use it remotely with their students this fall. So I wanted to kind of go over what iNaturalist is, what it isn't. I'm gonna do a little demonstration using the apps and the website, and then go over kind of best practices and just some ideas for how to use iNaturalist successfully in an educational setting. And then, yeah, again, I'd be happy to go over questions when I'm done. So we'll get started. Just to give you a background of what iNaturalist is. I try not to read too much from slides, but I do want to get this definition out of the way. We're a global platform and a social network where any member can share their observations of any wild organisms, and any other member can add identifications or comments to those observations. So basically, it's a social network if you're into nature, and it's basically discussing things that you've seen or that other people have seen. And every one of these observations is a data point, and these data are open to everyone with some caveats in regard to user privacy and protecting locations of threatened species. Now, what it is not, iNaturalist is not really designed to be a citizen science platform as kind of the general way citizen science or community science is generally accepted. We are not researchers. We are not asking amateur naturalists to go out and answer questions for us, to give us data for a question we're trying to answer. We're interested in, and I'm just going to quote here from the original document from iNaturalist when it was a master's project at Berkeley in 2008. We are interested in facilitating a lifestyle of data collection and encouraging data contribution through the self-interest of an avid hobbyist. We're not a data repository. We generate data from the use of our community, and so it's not really a top-down like we want you to do this. It's like, here's a place where you can share what you've seen and discuss it, and from that we generate what we think is pretty good data. And our main goal is actually to help people engage with nature. not to record data. The data is part of it, and that's awesome. But our main interest is that people start noticing and learning and wondering more about nature, and hopefully that will help them want to conserve it. And so really our focus is on growing and nurturing a community of naturalists of any experience level. So we have experts, we have world experts, we also have people who are just for the first time asking what that bug is and wanting an answer. So it's a pretty big, wide-ranging community with the goal of helping people engage with nature. And I just want to define really quickly what an observation on iNaturalist is. So an observation records an encounter between a human and a wild organism or recent evidence of a wild organism. So that could be scat, it could be bones, it could be roadkill, it could be a nest, it could be a leaf at a time and in a place. So this is a rattlesnake that I came across a few years ago, saved it off the road and it curled up nicely. So I took some photos and you can see I've got photo evidence here. To the right of the photos, you'll see a map of where I found the rattlesnake, and you'll also see the date and time where I encountered it. And below the photo, you'll see a description that I wrote. Those are optional. And then you'll see activities. So that's IDs and comments that other users can make on it. So I knew it was a Northern Pacific rattlesnake and added that identification, and someone came along and agreed with that identification. And you can see that up at the top, you'll see a little green thing called research grade. That just means that it's an observation of a wild organism that the community has agreed on to the species level. And so we share that with our data partners like the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So this is a record of a snake that I encountered at this time and at this place, basically. So that's what an observation is. It's the building block of iNaturalist. And I do want to emphasize that iNaturalist is about wild organisms. A lot of educators use it with students without kind of knowing that. And a lot of times we'll be flooded with observations of plants from the school's garden or from landscape areas or from pets. And those are all great, but we're interested in people taking the time to actually look at what's wild around them. So it could be a sidewalk weed, it could be an insect on a flower, it could be a bird, it could be a fungus that sprouts out from the schoolyard. But it should be wild. And it also helps keep our data straight because we want to make sure that when we have maps of where something occurs, that it's the wild population. A teacher in California a few years ago took their students to the zoo, and all of a sudden we had about 10 Komodo dragon observations on a range map in the middle of California, which wasn't very accurate. And I like to think of an observation as the start of a discussion. I saw this, I think it's this, what do you think? And you can see that people can add IDs or comments and discuss evidence. So it's kind of a good way to kind of show kids the scientific method and how disagreements and discussions can be had using evidence. iNat started in 2008, and I think in about 2011, we had our first mobile app. So we our growth definitely coincided with smartphones. So with a smartphone, you have a camera, you have a GPS antenna, you have a connection to the internet. And basically when you take a photo with a smartphone, you've got evidence and location and date and time that you can easily share online. So it kind of democratizes surveying and nature observation. You don't need fancy equipment because it's all kind of there in your pocket already. And kind of because of that, and because we really focus on community, on having a welcoming community and a knowledgeable community, we've grown quite a bit. We've grown exponentially over the past few years. You can see this was taken a few days ago with nearly 46 million observations, and we'll probably pass 46 million tonight. And we've got a good amount of the Earth covered. You'll see the Sahara and some other areas. Siberia are not as well covered as we'd hope, but we're still growing. And it's kind of an amazing thing that, here are 45 million records of organisms on the Earth that you can search through, that you can download data from. And because we're lucky enough to have a community that has identified basically millions of photos, we've been able to use those identified photos to train machine learning image recognition software called our computer vision software. And so if you take a photo and submit it to the app or to our website, it will take a look at the photo and it'll give you about 10 suggestions for what it might be. This is a moth I saw. It's a very common moth in the East Bay and in Sonoma. I've actually found in Sonoma County as well. And I submitted to iNaturalist, and its top species suggestion was Edwards glassy-wing. That's the correct one. So it's pretty cool. It works very well in California, less well in other parts of the world where we have less data. But here in the Bay Area, it works really, really well. And just as a quick example of iNaturalist, kind of the power of the social network of iNaturalist, this is kind of an amazing story. I think it was in 2018. It actually made some international headlines. Several people in Santa Barbara found this enormous mola fish, sunfish. I think it's the biggest bony fish in the world. Anyway, it washed up on shore. Some kids took photos. Some other people took photos. And I think we had about 3 or 4 observations of it submitted to iNaturalist. And everyone thought it was the common species that we see here in California, the mola mola, the common mola. Until someone in Australia looked at it and he's like, you know what? I think this is actually a different species that's actually common in Australia, but not off of California. And it's only been recently described. So he kind of went out on a limb and he actually tagged Marianne Nygaard. You'll see a little comment here on the right, who actually described this new species of sunfish, the hoodwinker mola. She's on iNaturalist, so that was pretty awesome. And he's like, what do you think? I think this could be, you know, a hoodwinker mola, the one that you described. And she's like, well, there's just not enough evidence from these photos. But she was able to contact some of the observers back in California. And the next morning, after the fish had washed out with the tide and washed back up, 2 people went out on the beach, one north, one south. They met at the fish. They took the photos, the diagnostic photos that she asked for, and she was able to confirm that it was a hoodwinker mola. This is the first documentation of this species in the Northern Hemisphere since the late 1800s. And you know, it was discovered by some people walking on the beach, and they shared it on iNat, and they were able to get in touch with the person who described it, which we think is super cool. Not going to happen all the time, but it does kind of show you the power of this worldwide network of people working together. And
did you get hurt?
And one more thing is that iNaturalist is a social network. You have to be 13 or older to have your own account. You got to remember that every observation you post is a public record of where you were on a certain day. So there are definite privacy issues. We also don't really have rewards or badges or any sort of gamification on iNaturalist because we feel that it's the wrong incentive, and it will generate poor data and poor interactions on the site because people will want to earn the badges rather than, you know, be accurate. So we've made a separate app called Seek, which is very privacy focused. It doesn't share any data. You don't need to make an account. And it uses live ID suggestions to help you identify species, and you can earn badges for the species that you find. So it kind of leverages iNaturalist to reach out to maybe a different group of people who maybe don't want to be as serious about sharing their data or about talking to other people, but still want to learn what's around them. So we think it's also a great alternative for students because it avoids a lot of the privacy issues that iNaturalist has. I'm going to demonstrate the apps and the website next. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. Can I see the chat? I don't think I can see the chat. So
I'll monitor it and let you know if
okay, cool. Thanks. Great. So I will move on to demonstrating the apps. Let me see if I can share a different screen here. All right. Can you see my phone?
Yes.
All right, great. So this is the iNaturalist app. You can see it's got my photo. It's got a list of observations of mine. I've made almost 27,000 over the past 12 years. And you'll see, like, this is what I've seen. And if I tap on, let's say, the redwood that I saw the other day, it's got my photo. It's got a map of where I saw it. And if I tap on this little discussion area, it shows my identification and someone else agreed with my identification that it's a coast redwood. So it's kind of like your main base of operations. Now, if you are out in the field and you see something, or if you have a photo on your phone already of like a cool plant, wow, that's embarrassing, a cool plant that you saw, you can actually import it into the app. That's what I'm gonna do here. So we also have an Android app. It looks differently, but the principles are all the same. So I'm gonna tap on observe. It's gonna open up my camera. And because I don't really wanna share my address right now, I'm gonna actually import a photo from my library. So I'm gonna tap on this lower right-hand part to access my image library. And let's see here. And here's a snake that I saw a few months ago. Okay, so I've chosen a photo. It's asked me if I want to choose a different one or to use this one. I'll go next. I'll choose this one. And you'll see that it's taken the date and the location and time of when this photo was made. So that's already recorded. And if I tap on what did you see, and I have an internet connection, it's going to actually send that photo to iNaturalist, and iNaturalist is going to say, okay, we're pretty sure it's in this genus, and here are the likely species, and it'll tell you which ones are visually similar and have been seen nearby. So if I'm not sure, I could always tap on the little eye next to it, and that'll show me a range map of where this animal was seen. That's a really good thing to start to do, and you can also look through other photos to see if maybe the one you have looks the same. So one thing that I've noticed a lot of educators do is just have their students just use the computer vision, and the students will just use this, and without even thinking about it, just tap the top suggestion. That works sometimes, but sometimes it's way off. Like the animal's not even on your continent. So I think it's a really important part to make them do some critical thinking and like look up the information of these species before they make a suggestion. Anyway, I know it's a king snake, but I could also, if I wasn't sure, but I just knew it was a snake, I could also just type in, oh, not snake, snakes. And I could just tap that. But I will just enter California king snake. So I've got my ID, I've got my date and time, I've got my location. If it was a garden plant or a pet, I would go to captive cultivated and say yes, but I'm not gonna do that. I could also, let's say I see something around my house and I don't wanna share my exact location. I can tap on geoprivacy and I can go obscured. And that'll show location in an area of about 22 to 25 square kilometers. I do that for everything I record around my house. Anyway, whenever I'm done here, I can tap share and it'll upload the observation to iNaturalist, and other people can take a look at it, add IDs and comments. And that's pretty much it. We try to make it really simple so that you don't have to go through a lot of steps to make an observation. We feel like every step that's involved generally leads to far fewer observations being submitted. I'm just going to delete this now. So that's how you make an observation in iNaturalist. With Seek is pretty cool. So first things first, Seek doesn't take your exact location. It takes a kind of a estimated location, and it'll actually show you what's been seen around you. And if you say, okay, I want to see a buckeye, it will tell you about it. It'll show you where it's been seen nearby, and it'll also show you the seasonality of it. So you can kind of know when and where to look for it. Or you could just, if you see something cool, you can open up the camera. Okay, and there is usually an error warning when you first open the app to tell you not to eat anything, not to touch anything, and not to trespass. But because I've already opened the camera once while I've had the app open, that didn't pop up. So I'm going to actually take it over to my friend's mushroom field guide, and as I move the camera over, you can see it actually change IDs and give me live ID suggestions. So at first, it was sort of like, mushrooms, and then once it got a better photo of it, it says fly agaric, that's the right species, and I can just take a photo of it. I get a little badge. It says I've observed a new species. I can view the species. It'll say, where I observed it, whether it's native or not. And it'll go on my little list of observations, plants, reptiles, fungi. And I can also see which achievements I've had. So that's my first fungus. So I've gotten a bronze badge. If I want to, if I observe 5, I'll get the next badge, et cetera, et cetera. And there are also challenges you can do. We put those out once a month. So for August, it was a pollinator challenge. And your mission is to find 2 plants in a mint, in the mint family or olives. Find 1 in the sunflower family, find 1 in the rose family, and find 2 insects that are pollinators. You get a little badge for completing those challenges. If you want to, when you make a new observation, you can, let's see here. If it doesn't get it right, or if you just want to submit it to iNaturalist, you can do that when you make a new observation. Post iNaturalist, you'll see here on the bottom. Oops. So that's how those 2 apps work. Any questions so far? All right, then I will share my browser and I'll show you our website really quick. All right, can you see the map on the screen?
Yes.
All right, cool. So this is our Explore page. I'm actually going to show you our home page. So it's a little bit like Facebook in that I'm following other users, and I'm going to see, and my little newsfeed here shows me what they have been uploading lately. I can also subscribe to a taxon or a place. So right now I'm subscribed to snakes in California. So I can quickly see which snakes have been seen in California. So that's kind of the social part of iNaturalist. That's not really part of the app because the app is really made for making observations in the field. But what's really cool is we have the Explore page. So by default, it shows all observations made in the world of verifiable observations. So they have evidence, they have a date, time, location, and they're of wild organisms. And so we have about 45,900,000 of those, of almost 300,000 species, made by over 1.2 million observers. And if I want to, I could click on one of these and it shows me where it's been seen. But what's really cool is I can use filters to really kind of narrow these down. So if I wanted to just see what was seen in Sonoma County, I can choose that for the place. And you'll see the map moves to Sonoma County. And about 220,000 observations have been made there of almost 7,000 species. You can kind of see the map here. These rectangles are from obscured observations. So like I said, they're put in a grid just to make sure that people can't poach them or people aren't giving away their privacy. I can zoom in a little closer. You can see that. It's kind of cool. You can sometimes they'll follow roads, or you'll see them follow trails or certain parks. It's pretty fascinating. And what you can do is you can narrow them down even further. So let's say I want to see every place that poison oak has been seen in Sonoma County. I would just pick that in the species, and there's been about 707 observations of those, and you can kind of just see where they've been seen. That doesn't mean this is only where they are. It means where people have reported that they are. So it's always a mix of where people like to go and where the organism exists. And if I want to, I can click on any of these, and I can go to the actual observation page, see the photo, see the map, and see the IDs and the other activity on it. This is really cool because it's really powerful to kind of see where things have been seen, what time of year they've been seen. I could see, okay, which ones have been seen where has it been seen in August, and just see August of every year. Where has Pacific poison oak been seen in Sonoma County? So you can kind of just narrow it down some more. And if you get a set of observations you're interested in, you can go here to download, and you can download that set of observations and include, the date, the location, and lots of other information, and then play around with that data if you want. So it's a pretty good way of using data and not just contributing data. There are a lot of other uses of iNaturalist, but those are kind of the three basic ones I wanted to go over. And let me see here. I'll go back to sharing my desktop. All right, can you guys see my slides again?
Yes. Yep.
Cool. All right, so that's kind of the basics of what iNaturalist is and kind of how to use it, kind of the rudiments of it. So I do want to go over some thoughts and suggestions of how to use iNaturalist with students. Because I'm the community manager and I generally get complaints, I'm unfortunately more familiar with poor uses of iNaturalist than really successful ones, although I'm trying to learn more about the really successful ways that iNaturalist has been used with students. But I'm going to go over both right now. And yeah, I think one thing I've noticed over the years is that a lot of teachers or educators, I should say, they focus on citizen science, which is a big term. It's a cool thing, but they really want their students, even like grades 1 or 2, to be contributing data. And that sometimes works, but a lot of times it results in really blurry photos of garden plants or your friends or like other students being submitted to the community. And the community is amazing. They are identifying millions of observations on their own time. What they don't want to see is a bunch of observations that aren't really that useful or that identifiable. So it kind of creates a backlog of observations. And I'm not sure the students really learn much by taking a photo of a plant, tapping a button and submitting it. I don't think that's really the best way to use iNaturalist with students because there are really other ways to use it that I think will really help them build the skills that they might need or use later in life and build in them the appreciation and curiosity about nature. So I wouldn't recommend having data contribution being the major aspect of your work with iNaturalist. I would use it for learning observation skills. If you are a computer science teacher, we have an API and all of our code is open source. So you could actually have your students use iNaturalist observations and iNaturalist data with our API to make little programs. I can show you that a little bit later. Although I'm not a programmer, I'll just point that out. And a lot of teachers, especially older ones like in high school, middle school, they'll use the data exploration part of iNaturalist to kind of have their students, ask and answer questions and just get them used to like reading and understanding data. And I think critical thinking can be part of all of this. I think that's a really crucial aspect of it. The app won't automatically make them be better scientists or naturalists. It'll help them maybe in certain ways, but it does need a lot of context and guidance. So this is our co-director's daughter. They're on a road trip and she just caught a beautiful little garter snake. So I think one thing we hear a lot about from teachers and from everybody who uses iNaturalist is that it makes them more curious. Once they start taking a few photos and understanding what they are, they start looking around more and noticing more. There was a beautiful article written by a birder who was like, all I cared about before was birds. Now I'm looking at the plants the birds are on. And oh my gosh, what are these insects that are on these plants that these birds are on? And it really can help you understand a lot more about nature. And once you kind of understand and know what things are and know how many things are out there, the hope is that hopefully you'll get more interested in conserving it, protecting it, and sharing about it. So I would really kind of emphasize the skills of observation, like, how do you, okay, that's a plant, but like, and that plant is, iNaturalist says it's a willow, but how would you describe the leaves? Or like, what color? What do you think makes it a willow? Really kind of working with the students to kind of just get those observational powers. That's something you'll learn for the rest of your life. That's something you'll use the rest of your life is, what am I seeing and what kind of conclusions can I draw from it? What can I know and what can I not know about it? There's a lot going on when you become a naturalist. You start understanding how little you actually know and how much you can be sure of. A lot of people will want to identify something to the species level. A lot of times that's not possible from a photo. A lot of spiders need to be dissected, or you need a microscope to look at them to know exactly what species you're looking at. So I think it's really important to, what evidence do you have and what can you say with that evidence? And also, where do you find things? I think those are the really important things that you can teach by using iNaturalist. Here are some ideas that I've gleaned from teachers and just some on my own. An easy one to be a scavenger hunt, especially if they're remote. Actually, these top two are kind of the same. You could say, okay, find X plants, X insects in your neighborhood, so that they're looking for more than one type of organism, or get to know what is in your neighborhood. And now, next time you go on a walk around your neighborhood, you actually know what that is. You can tell someone else. You'll know what might eat that or when it's going to flower. What's on campus? What weeds are growing on campus? What bugs are coming to our garden? Those are two just really easy ways to kind of just get them out and get them kind of noticing things. Ferris Jobber, who's a writer for the New York Times Magazine, wrote about iNaturalist, and he said that once you know the name of something, it's kind of like a password to it. So you may, if you see a bird, you might go, oh, brown bird, what is it? You might not know, but if iNaturalist gives you a name, you'd be like, okay, that's a song sparrow. I can type that into Google or Wikipedia and I can actually learn about that. It unlocks the whole world of knowledge. So one thing, you can have the students do is once they kind of see what's around them, maybe have them do some research on one or two of their favorite finds, and they can figure out, and they can learn even more about the nature around them. And maybe for older students, sometimes the species suggestions from iNaturalist or Seek are not correct. They may be way off. And it's probably a good way to actually start thinking about why that might be. Are there other creatures that look like this? A lot of times it'll suggest maybe a California species in Asia because a lot of our data comes from California. So, think about where does this data come from and how is the model biased towards certain things? I think that's, a really important thing to learn, especially as AI, although we don't really call it AI, but that's as more like algorithms and models become part of our lives, it's a really important thing to learn. And it's something we're thinking about all the time. So those are just a few ideas for how to use the observation functionality. Data exploration, like I said, there's millions of observations and you can filter them using the Explore page. And, you can use them to answer questions like, what is like, how many redwoods are in Sonoma County and where are they? Or you could like turn it around and look at the data and then maybe ask questions from the data. So, easily, you can search locally, have the kids search for their favorite things and find out where they're seen, what time of year they might be seen. Some plants only come up for a few months throughout the year. We've actually been able to track that some plants are blooming way earlier in the year than they used to, just from iNaturalist observations. You could compare different habitats. I know some teachers have had students, look at observations maybe in a city or in a desert or in a rainforest and discuss, what are the differences here? Why are we seeing these and not these? And probably for maybe older students, you could compare them with other maps, such as language. Do places that speak English have a higher number of observations? Or prosperity? A lot of observations are made by people who have access to a phone or a camera or have disposable time or income where they can go to, Yosemite and take photos there. During the pandemic, we've noticed that compared to last year, for instance, Point Reyes, Yosemite, Grand Canyon all have fewer observations than they did last year because people are just not traveling anymore. But we have more observations, in urban areas. So those are just kind of questions and things you might be able to ask or answer. And also, what are observed most often? Our most observed species are mallards. Those occur everywhere. They're big, they're easy to photograph, they're pretty, and kind of everyone knows them. And maybe people see a lot of mosquitoes, but those are hard to photograph and those are hard to identify. And maybe you don't want to be around any mosquitoes, which, I think most of us don't. So, what are the biases in these data? How are these data, why are almost all the data are more toward trailheads than they are at the ends of trails, probably because people are really excited about everything they see that's new. And then maybe it's not as novel when they reach the end of a trail. And finally, as I said before, iNaturalist has an open API, and we've had people use it for programming. So someone, just as a lark, made a little quiz. So you can type your location and you can get quizzed on species that have been seen by you. And so this was a fun one where I put in Sonoma County, and I got 4 choices here. Which one is which? It times you, and it gives you points if you get the correct one. If you pick the correct one, it's kind of fun to just quiz yourself. That's just using iNaturalist data that is available for anyone to use. So let me just wrap up. There are some common pitfalls. So one is giving the students a quota or a reward. When we've had teachers say, you have to make 25 observations, this usually results in copyright infringement, pets, or last minute rushes of garden plants. And especially if you say they have to research grade, students will just identify each other's observations, and even though they don't know what they are, just to give each other research grade status, and that creates bad data. As I said before, expecting students just to learn by making an observation, that'd be great, but it really does need guidance, and it needs critical thinking. Not providing clear expectations for behavior. So unfortunately, the majority of offensive content on iNat comes from students. They will take photos of themselves or their peers. They will give them like an insulting or sometimes racist identification. They will sometimes add joke IDs to other people's observations, so actually affecting other users on the site. And a lot of times, either maliciously or not maliciously, they will just use photos from the internet as an example of what they saw if they couldn't get a photo, which is copyright infringement, which a lot of people don't really understand, because images are shared without attribution all the time nowadays, but that is an issue. And then finally, please pay attention and curate your students' content. So please pay attention to what they're uploading, because it can be troublesome, and as the instructor, you should be responsible for them. And that does mean laying out expectations beforehand, so they know exactly what they should be posting or not posting. And best practices. By far, familiarity with iNaturalist is the biggest indicator for success. So please use it for a week or 2 at least. Get to know the community, get to know how things work, what works best, what doesn't work, before you introduce it to your students. I want to emphasize that no one under 13 can have their own account without parents' permission. And that permission requires a small donation, and it's kind of torturous. So a lot of teachers usually just make a classroom account and have their students log in through that. That way the teacher can also curate the content if something inappropriate pops up. And just remember that everything is public, and everything that's added to iNaturalist affects not only the user who added it, but everyone else, because that data needs to be cleaned up or evaluated by other users. Discuss copyright law and ethics.
Tony, we had a couple questions about teachers monitoring. And one of the questions says, if I set up an online account and give my students access, is that the only way to monitor my content? Which you kind of talked about. Another one, is there a way to monitor other ways that they can monitor, let's say if they're using Seek or anything like that?
Yeah, well, Seek is meant to be really contained. We actually don't know much about users from Seek because we don't collect hardly any information from them. I mean, the odds are that they wouldn't be making a lot of public observations with Seek, because it's a bit of a torturous process to do that. But it would be, you would have to know their username and monitor their username on iNaturalist if they're using Seek. And that's kind of the same if you have the students have their own account. Know what have them tell you what their username is, and you can follow them and look at their observations if need be.
Have you seen examples of, like a class using Google Photos and sharing stuff to that folder, and then as a class people upload things? Or
So that's another route that I've heard of. So instead of having the students post directly to iNaturalist, you can have them just take photos with their phone. Make sure the location is turned on for their phone's camera, so it records the location. And then they can share those photos to like a shared Google Photos album. And then you can go over the photos with the students and then post them to your classroom account. And that way you can kind of discuss which photos might be best. You know, this one is closer, so it might have more details that someone can evaluate. Or, you know, maybe give everyone a chance, you know, maybe upload one photo from every student and pick their best one. That is a good way, that is a good way to kind of mediate what goes onto iNaturalist before it gets there. That's one approach I've seen.
And there was another question about, is there a resource on teaching how to become better observers? For instance, when I started using iNaturalist, I noticed that a lot of my pictures were pretty far away. And is it better to submit the higher quality picture or to zoom in and crop the picture of what I'm trying to do?
Let's see. We don't have great resources. I made a short video a few years ago about principles for making the best photos. So like get close, but if it's like a rattlesnake, don't get too close. And you know, things like you can add more than one photo to an observation. So for plants especially, you can take a photo of the flowers and then take a photo of the leaves and stem, because a lot of times both of those are needed to identify a plant. One thing I do want to do is to try and create a more centralized resource for educators. Yesterday I opened up a new category on our users forum called Educators, where educators can share ideas, curricula, and experiences, like best practices that they've encountered. So hopefully, I would love for that to be like a really thriving community. As far as like zooming, as far as cropping in, yes, especially for like our computer vision recognition, you want to have the organism as big as possible in the overall photo. That helps a lot. Yeah, I know that's one thing a lot of students do is they'll just kind of like, oh, there's a tree like all the way over there, and I'll just take a photo of it. And it's great they notice there's a tree, but it's almost impossible to identify it from there. So, you know, tell them to, you know, get a photo of the leaf, and, you know, make sure, like a lot of times they're so excited, they'll just like kind of press it and it'll be a blurry photo. It's fine to like, yeah, especially like if it's windy, like you can hold the flower, make sure it's not like poison oak or something, but hold the plant, and it's fine to have your finger in there. It actually also adds scale to the photo, so that helps as well. Yes, you're pointing out that we don't have a great resource just for that, and I think that's definitely something we need to make, hopefully sooner rather than later. I'm almost done here. I just, again, have a goal in mind. I think that's just so important to like, what do you want them to get out of this, and what do you want them to learn, and how can iNaturalist help them get there? And finally, remember that it's about wild organisms. That's a really important thing. We do have a teacher's guide that kind of goes over the basic best practices, common pitfalls, and legal issues of using iNaturalist with students. And I think that's pretty much it. So I'm happy to take questions. I could also, if anyone has like specific questions about the app or the website, I can demonstrate those as well. But just let me know. I will stop sharing my screen right now. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Has anyone used iNaturalist before? Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, nice.
I have a question.
Sure.
I haven't used it with my students. I used it to like prepare myself for a project that I then used with the students. And part of that was because I wasn't sure how to have the students use it if they can have an account. So you were saying create an account and then give the students access to that account.
Yeah.
And then is there a way within that to like monitor who is putting up what? Because I mean, if something comes up that's inappropriate, I don't want to just like blanket it all over the class.
Yeah. I mean, there isn't really a way to know exactly who uploaded that. I mean, I guess we could, you know, if it's something really bad, you could email help at iNaturalist and we can maybe see which IP address made that, but even then it might be difficult.
Yeah.
But I think hopefully just having that classroom account will make them think twice about doing that.
And then you can monitor it, and I was just messing with it and Seek and stuff, and you can delete posts and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to I don't want to say it's a huge problem, but it's just that I'm the one who sees these problems, and they can be pretty bad sometimes. We've had some pretty insulting and racist stuff posted by especially high school students.
Yeah.
And it's just something to be aware of. I definitely would have, if I'd had the internet and when I was a teenager, I would have done something stupid for sure. And I think these kids don't realize that when they do something stupid or offensive, that everyone's going to see it, and it's not great.
Absolutely. Great.
So
Thank you.
So in the class, I just want to make sure I understand, in the classroom account, it doesn't actually get posted unless the teacher says, okay, it can go.
No, it'll get posted. So basically, it'd be like if I gave you access to my email account, right? You would sign in and you could send an email from my account to anyone. But it would allow you to easily kind of remove any content that maybe isn't appropriate to iNaturalist. Rather than if they had their own account, you wouldn't be able to curate their stuff at all. You'd have to ask us or someone else to remove it.
So once it's posted, it's posted.
Yeah.
I can remove it, but I can remove it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why, maybe the Google photo method or some sort of like intermediary like discussion, which I think is actually probably really good, would be great too. And then, after those photos are posted, maybe the next day, once they have some identifications, you could have another discussion about, what you saw and where to move from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One of the features that I didn't even realize your phone had, like if I took a picture from last year of something and it was on my phone and I searched Google Photos for whatever, snake or bear or whatever, it would bring those up. And if I put them on iNaturalist, it still had the location of where they were at the time that the photo was taken.
Yeah.
So even if you're a month later, you can still add photos.
Yeah, we've had people delete. There's one user in Texas who's I think he's identified hundreds of thousands of observations, but he's also uploaded his slides from dating back from the 60s. So it's kind of a cool time capsule of what things might have been like back then. Pretty cool.
Tony, is there a resource for educators if they're trying to go over with their students, here are the criteria and here are the just community norms for iNaturalist? Is there a place on the website to direct them to?
We have a getting started guide. There, like I said, there's a teacher's guide. This is all in the help section of the website. The help page itself has a lot of FAQs that'll kind of help you like as to like what, the definition of an observation, what kind of photos should you post. So those can be pretty helpful, but there is probably not a great central resource exactly for that. To be honest, we've been growing so fast over the past few years. A lot of our time and resources have been spent helping just keeping up with the scaling. But I think these are, you're pointing out some really good things that we do need to add for sure. We also have a community guidelines. There's a link to it in the footer of our website, and that goes over, obviously no hate speech, no insults, no sock puppet accounts, and then kind of best practices. Assume people mean well, cite evidence when you reply, if you disagree with someone, cite evidence and be civil, et cetera, et cetera. And we really try to make iNaturalist a place where discourse is pretty good. There's a lot of places on the internet, unfortunately, that are pretty bad, and that'll happen sometimes on iNaturalist, but we try to keep it pretty welcoming to anyone who's new. And you can always email me at help@inaturalist.org, and I'll look into it if you have a problem. Has anyone used Seek before? It's pretty fun. Okay. It's pretty cool. And I think what's interesting about it is that it'll actually show you, if it can't get to species, it'll show you how far down up the taxonomic tree you are. So it might go to order or class or genus. And that's kind of a good way to just teach kids that, at very basic level, how things are related to each other. yeah, like this spider is an arachnid and this tick is an arachnid or something, or, you know, and it's a good way to kind of teach that as well. Even if you don't know exactly what it is, you know, you could say, okay, well, it has 8 legs, so I know it's at least an arachnid. And I think even for a lot of people, that's a big bit of knowledge and something that they can use when they're walking around. Yes.
Oh, I was gonna say, I used iNaturalist like 4 or 5 years ago, so it's really cool to like compare it now to then. It's like way better now. So that's neat. And then I was just messing with Seek. I just went on a trip, and one of the guys I was with took a ton of like pictures of nature. And then so I was just like going through his photos with my phone, and it was so cool that it could like identify the western rattlesnake and all sorts of different insects and plants. So I could see that with students too. Like if I went out and I took pictures and then they were using Seek to like identify things, or if they took pictures with their camera and then brought it back and did it that way. Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. Thank you very much for this.
Any other questions or comments? I mean, I'm happy to stay for another 10 minutes or so. If not.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tony.
Cool.
And then if they need help, reach out to you or reach out to...
Yeah, so help at iNaturalist.org. And like I said, we have a community forum. It's forum.inaturalist.org. And like I said, I just started an educators category, so it's a little thin right now. I want to try and seed it with a few more discussion, maybe topics, but I think that might be, I want that to grow into like a place where teachers can ask each other advice. Because I mean, I have some background and some of our other staff members do, but I think coming from teachers who've used it, I think would be great to have a place to talk about it. And best of luck with distance learning, and it's gonna be interesting fall semester. All right,
Well,
thank you, everyone.
So much, and we'll put the recording in the folder for people to watch, and please share it with other teachers at your site, and let's spread the great resource we have here.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.